At my son's wedding, the last thing I expected was to be humiliated by my daughter-in-law. I thought this day would be a celebration of love, but instead, it turned into something I'll never forget. It all started when Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, grabbed the mic at the reception. With a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she said, "The old cheap woman won't pay?" My heart sank. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and all I could do was stand there, frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I had been there for her, supported her and Ethan through everything, and now, in front of everyone, she was mocking me. The laughter around me felt like a blur. I looked around the room, searching for a familiar face, but all I could see were strangers and my family, laughing along with her. Ethan, my son, didn't even look up from his plate. He was too busy enjoying his dinner, as though nothing was wrong. It wasn't the first time I'd felt ignored by him, but this was different. This was public, and it was painful. I tried to push the pain aside, but it was hard. I had been there when Ethan was born. I had held his hand through his first steps, his first heartbreak. I thought he would stand by me when I needed him, but instead, he just watched, silent, as his wife tore me down. Rebecca's words echoed in my mind. "The old cheap woman won't pay?" I had always worked hard. I had always given everything for my family. And now this? I had worked so many years to give Ethan the life he had, and this was how I was repaid. The room felt colder as the night dragged on. I tried to pretend like nothing was wrong, but my heart ached. How could they do this to me? How could they let her treat me like this? The night was supposed to be about love, about family, but instead, it was a reminder of how little I mattered to the people I cared about most. I stayed in the corner, watching as Ethan and Rebecca danced, laughing and celebrating, completely unaware of the damage they had done. I wanted to confront them, to stand up for myself, but what good would it do? I was alone. In a room full of people who had all turned their backs on me. This wasn't just a wedding, this was a reminder that my place in their lives had been replaced by someone else. I had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together, but now, I was just a shadow. A shadow in my own family, left to watch as they tore apart the life I had built. I sat at the back of the reception hall, my hands trembling as I watched Ethan and Rebecca dance. The laughter and music filled the air, but inside, all I could hear was the cold silence that had settled in my heart. I had spent my whole life building a family, a home, a legacy. I had given everything, yet here I was, invisible, rejected, humiliated. I had thought Ethan would be different, that he would protect me, stand by me, especially when I needed him most. But instead, he had chosen her. Rebecca. The woman who had made it clear that I was nothing more than an inconvenience, someone to be tolerated but never truly loved. I didn't know when things had started to change. Maybe it was when Rebecca entered our lives, or maybe it was when Ethan got too busy with his own world. Either way, the distance between us had grown wider with each passing year. I had tried to ignore it, to pretend that everything was fine, that we were still a family. But the truth was hard to ignore. The truth was sitting right in front of me, mocking me at my son's wedding. I glanced over at the table where the family had gathered, but no one met my gaze. No one seemed to notice the tears that were threatening to spill from my eyes. It was as though I no longer mattered. I had always been the one to hold everything together. The one who made sure everyone was fed, loved, and cared for. But now, I was alone. Alone in a room full of people who once called me family. I tried to shake off the feeling of betrayal, but it clung to me like a shadow. I had spent decades raising Ethan, making sure he had everything he needed, sacrificing my own happiness for his future. And now, he couldn't even look at me. I wondered if he even knew what he had lost, or if he cared at all. The thought of confronting him, of telling him how much his actions hurt, crossed my mind, but I stopped myself. What would it change? Nothing. The damage was already done. He had chosen Rebecca, and that meant he had chosen to turn his back on me. As I sat there, trying to hold myself together, I saw Rebecca glance over at me. Her eyes were filled with smug satisfaction, as though she had won some kind of victory. And maybe she had. Maybe she had finally pushed me out of their lives for good. I couldn't help but feel a wave of resentment wash over me. How had things gotten so bad? How had the woman who used to call me Mom become someone I no longer recognized? I looked at Ethan, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. The son I had raised was gone, replaced by a man who was too caught up in his own life to care about anyone else. Not even me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead, I sat there in silence. Watching as they danced, as they laughed, as they celebrated a future that no longer included me. The reality of my situation began to sink in. This wasn't just a wedding. This wasn't just a momentary embarrassment. This was the end of everything I had known. My family was no longer mine. And there was nothing I could do to change it. I waited for hours in the silence of my own thoughts. The evening had turned into a blur of noise, laughter, and dancing, but I had lost my place in it. It was as though the world had moved on, leaving me behind, and I was too tired to fight it anymore. I watched from the corner of the room as Ethan and Rebecca continued to bask in the attention of their guests. Their smiles were so perfect, so insincere. I wondered if they ever truly saw me, if they even cared about what I was going through. The weight of their indifference was suffocating. I thought about leaving, about walking out of the room, but I couldn't. This was supposed to be my son's special day, and despite everything, I wanted to be there for him. I had always been there. For him. My mind drifted back to the years I had spent raising Ethan, nurturing him through every stage of life. I had given him everything I had, all of my love, all of my time. And now, it felt as though none of it mattered. He had built his life with Rebecca, and in doing so, he had left me behind. It wasn't just that he wasn't standing up for me. It was that he didn't even seem to notice the damage Rebecca was doing. She had been playing this game for a long time, and I had been too blind to see it. She had turned him against me, made him believe that I was a burden, a relic of the past. I couldn't help but wonder if he even remembered the woman who had raised him. The thought of confronting him again crossed my mind, but I knew better than to expect anything different. He had made his choice. Rebecca had him wrapped around her finger, and there was nothing I could do to change that. I stood up and walked to the window, needing some space, needing to clear my head. Outside, the night was quiet, the streetlights casting a soft glow on the pavement. The world seemed peaceful, untouched by the chaos inside. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the calmness of the night wash over me. When I opened my eyes, I noticed something that caught my attention. Ethan was standing alone near the buffet table, his back turned to the crowd. For a moment, I thought he might be looking for me, but as I took a few steps closer, I realized he was staring at Rebecca. She was laughing with some of the guests, her arms draped over other people, looking so carefree, so happy. I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. I had never been that carefree, never been able to just enjoy life without worrying about the consequences. Maybe that was why I was being left behind. I wasn't a part of their world anymore. I felt the tears well up in my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away. I couldn't let them see me break. Not tonight. I walked back into the room and found an empty chair near the back. I sat down and tried to steady my breathing. The sound of the music, the chatter, and the clinking of glasses seemed so distant now, like they were coming from another world. I was trapped in a space between two lives, the one I had built with love and sacrifice, and the one that was slipping away from me, piece by piece. As I sat there, I realized that I had been holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. The family I had known was gone, replaced by strangers who no longer cared. I had spent so much of my life thinking that everything would be okay, that if I just tried hard enough, if I loved enough, everything would work out. But it didn't. It wasn't enough. And I wasn't enough. I felt the weight of that truth settle in my chest, heavy and unyielding. But even as the pain washed over me, I couldn't bring myself to leave. I was still hoping for something, some sign that maybe, just maybe, Ethan would see me again. But as the night wore on, I knew deep down that hope was fading. I was no longer a part of their world, and it was time to accept it. The night stretched on, and I felt like I was sinking deeper into the quiet abyss of my own thoughts. It wasn't the first time I had felt this way, this sense of being discarded, but tonight, it was different. There was something final about it, something irreversible. I had spent so many years hoping, waiting, believing that the love I had poured into my family would come back to me when I needed it most. But now, I was left standing on the outside, looking in. I had raised Ethan, loved him unconditionally, and supported him through every step of his life. But with each passing day, it felt like I was becoming more and more irrelevant. I could feel it in the way he looked at me now, the way Rebecca seemed to have control over everything. They had turned into a unit, an impenetrable force, and I was nothing more than a lingering shadow in their lives. As I sat there in the corner of the room, watching the happy couple, I couldn't help but replay the moments that had led to this. I remembered the early days when Ethan was small, when he would run to me with scraped knees and tears in his eyes. I was his world back then. I had taught him how to ride a bike, how to tie his shoes, how to be kind. And now, he couldn't even look at me without a hint of discomfort in his eyes. I thought about the time when he and Rebecca first got together. I had welcomed her into our family, tried to make her feel at home, even though there was something about her that never sat right with me. She had always been polite, always smiling, but there was a coldness to her that I couldn't ignore. I should have known then that something was off. But I had hoped. I had hoped that she would be the one to bring Ethan happiness, that she would be the one to make him a better man. Instead, she had driven a wedge between us, pushing him further away with every passing day. I never asked for much. All I wanted was to be included, to be valued, to know that I still mattered. But with each year that passed, I found myself fading further into the background. I didn't know when it happened exactly, the moment when I stopped being the mother who was needed, the woman who was loved. Maybe it was when Rebecca started making all the decisions, when Ethan began to spend more time with her than with me. Maybe it was when I stopped being invited to family gatherings, or when my calls went unanswered. It didn't matter. The truth was clear now. I had become invisible to them. I tried to push away the bitter taste that filled my mouth, but it was impossible. The reality was too harsh. I was no longer the woman they looked to for comfort, for guidance, for love. I was just a burden, something to be tolerated but never truly cared for. As I sat there, alone in the crowd, I realized how much of my life had been spent hoping for a love that would never come back to me. I had given everything, and in return, I had received nothing. The empty seat at the table, the absence of my voice in their decisions, it was all part of the same painful truth. I wasn't a part of their lives anymore. And the worst part? They didn't even seem to notice. I couldn't bear to watch them any longer. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. I needed to get out, to breathe, to escape the suffocating weight of the evening. But as I walked toward the exit, I heard a voice behind me. "Mom, where are you going?" It was Ethan. For a moment I thought I might turn around, might say something, but the words wouldn't come. What was there left to say? I had nothing left to give, nothing left to prove. I had already lost him. I didn't need to hear him tell me everything was fine, or that he still loved me, or that I was important to him. I knew better. I had already seen the truth in his eyes. So I kept walking, out of the hall, out of their lives. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and I was finally alone. Alone with my thoughts, alone with my grief. I had spent my entire life giving, loving, hoping. But tonight, I realized that some things can never be fixed, some wounds can never heal. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go. I woke up the next morning, feeling the weight of the night pressing heavily on me. The events of the wedding, the cruelty, the laughter that had echoed in my ears, it all felt like a bad dream. I tried to shake it off, but the truth lingered, thick in the air around me. I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried. I sat in the kitchen, the house eerily quiet. The coffee pot gurgled softly, and I absent-mindedly watched the steam rise, the smell of coffee filling the room. It should have been a comforting scent, something familiar, but today it only reminded me of how alone I was. I hadn't heard from Ethan, not since I left the wedding. No phone calls, no messages, not even a word of concern. It was as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't seen the way Rebecca had treated me, the way she had humiliated me in front of everyone. It hurt, more than I could put into words. How could he not care? How could he let her do that to me? He was my son. He should have stood up for me. But no, instead, he had turned his back. I thought of the past, of the years I had spent raising him, of the sacrifices I had made, the sleepless nights, the countless hours spent worrying, and loving, and caring for him. And now, it felt like all of that had been for nothing. I had poured my heart into him, into my family, and this is what I got in return: silence. I sighed and took a sip of my coffee, trying to steady my nerves. The truth was, I didn't know where to go from here. I had always been the one to keep everything together, the one who held the family close, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. But now, I was the one falling apart, and no one seemed to notice. I thought about calling Ethan, about confronting him, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. The damage was already done. Rebecca had already won. She had made her place in his life, and I had become an afterthought, a nuisance to be dealt with when it was convenient for them. As I sat there, the reality of the situation hit me harder than ever. I had raised my son, given him everything, and now he was gone from me. I had never imagined it would end this way. I had always believed that family was supposed to be there for you, no matter what. That's what I had done for them, been there through thick and thin. But now, it seemed like my love had meant nothing. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the empty street. The world outside was still moving, still going on, but inside, I felt like I was stuck in place, unable to move forward. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know where to go from here. But one thing was clear: I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep waiting for a family that didn't want me. I had spent so much of my life giving, loving, and hoping. It was time for me to stop. It was time for me to find my own way, to reclaim my life, even if that meant doing it alone. And so, I made a decision. I would no longer wait for Ethan to come to me, no longer wait for his approval, or his love, or his attention. I would no longer let Rebecca's cruelty control my life. It was time for me to take control. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I was done being the person who was always there for everyone else, only to be ignored when I needed them the most. I was done being invisible. I was done letting them dictate my worth. I would move forward, with or without them. It had been a few days since the wedding, and the weight of everything was still hanging over me. The silence from Ethan was deafening, and Rebecca's absence felt like an ever-present shadow in my life. I tried to stay busy, to keep my mind occupied, but every thought kept returning to that night, to her words, to the way they had made me feel so small, so irrelevant. I knew I had to move on, to find a way to heal, but the pain was deep. It was the kind of pain that crept in slowly, like a vine winding around your heart, squeezing tighter and tighter until you couldn't breathe. I hadn't realized just how much I had depended on Ethan, how much I had based my worth on his love and approval. He had always been my greatest joy, my reason for living. And now, it seemed like I no longer mattered to him. I hadn't wanted to admit it, hadn't wanted to face the reality of what was happening, but now, I could see it clearly. He had chosen Rebecca, and in doing so, he had chosen to leave me behind. It hurt more than I could put into words. I had always been there for him, always supported him, and yet, when it came down to it, he had turned his back on me without a second thought. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that Rebecca had humiliated me, or the fact that Ethan had let it happen. That was the part one couldn't understand. How could he stand by and watch her tear me down like that? How could he not see how much it hurt? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been blind for far too long. I had been so focused on keeping the peace, on maintaining the illusion of a happy family, that I hadn't seen the cracks forming beneath the surface. I had been giving, loving, sacrificing for them, but they had taken it all for granted. I was nothing but a convenience to them, someone to fill a role, to make things easier. But no more. I couldn't keep living in this fantasy. I had spent too many years putting everyone else's needs before my own, letting them dictate my happiness. It was time for me to take back control, to start living for myself. It wouldn't be easy. I knew that. But I had to do it. I had to find a way to stop letting them define me, to stop letting their actions determine my worth. So, I began to make plans. Small ones at first, just little steps toward reclaiming my life. I went through the house, sorting through old things, deciding what to keep and what to let go. I spent hours going through the old photo albums, reminiscing about the good times, about the family I once had. But this time, I didn't feel the need to hold on to everything. I let go of the things that didn't serve me anymore. I didn't need them. Slowly, I started taking back pieces of my life. I began to take care of myself, to focus on the things that brought me joy. I spent more time with my friends, started taking long walks by myself, just enjoying the peace and quiet. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I began to realize that I wasn't invisible, that I still had value, even without their approval. And slowly, I started to heal. I wasn't the woman I once was, but that didn't mean I couldn't be something new. I could be strong again, on my own terms. I didn't need their validation. As the days passed, I began to feel a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in years. The weight that had been sitting on my chest began to lift, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't going to let them break me. I wasn't going to let their cruelty define me. I had spent too many years living for others. Now it was my turn to live for myself. It had been a few weeks since I began focusing on myself, and though the pain still lingered, it didn't hurt as much. I had started to rediscover parts of myself that I had long neglected, small moments of joy that I had once taken for granted. I spent more time with friends, rekindling old relationships that had been pushed aside in the years of raising Ethan and keeping the family together. I found comfort in simple things, long walks in the park, reading books I had left on the shelf for far too long, and even cooking meals just for myself, savoring each bite. It wasn't that I didn't miss my family. There were moments when I would think of Ethan, of the laughter we used to share, of the way things were before Rebecca had come into the picture. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. I wasn't waiting for him to call anymore. I wasn't hoping for him to come back into my life the way he used to be. And as the days went by, I realized something. I didn't need him. I didn't need Rebecca. I didn't need anyone to define who I was or what my worth was. I had spent too much of my life looking to others for validation, waiting for their approval, thinking that their love was the measure of my value. But now I understood that my worth had always been inside me. I had always been enough. It was a revelation, one that brought both peace and strength. I had allowed myself to be diminished for so long, to be someone who was needed, someone who was there to give and give until there was nothing left. But now, I was learning to take care of myself. And though it was hard at first, there was freedom in that. I wasn't defined by my family's expectations anymore. I wasn't the mother, the grandmother, the caretaker. I was just me. And that was enough. There were still moments, of course, when I would remember the way Ethan used to be, the way he would seek me out when he needed advice or comfort. I missed that version of him. But I also realized that people change. Relationships evolve. And sometimes it wasn't about fighting to keep those relationships alive. Sometimes it was about letting them go, about stepping back and giving yourself the space to breathe. I knew I had to keep moving forward, even if that meant doing so without them. And so I began to make new plans. I looked into volunteer work, something I had always wanted to do but had never had the time for. I joined a book club, something I thought would bring me a sense of community. I even signed up for a cooking class. I was determined to fill my life with things that made me happy, things that would help me grow. And the more I did these things, the more I realized that I wasn't alone. I had a community. I had friends. I had a life. I didn't need Ethan's approval to be happy. I didn't need Rebecca's validation. And as the months passed, I found a new sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. The loneliness I had once felt was replaced with a quiet, steady strength. I wasn't waiting for my son to come back into my life. I was living my life for me. I didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could face it on my own. And that was enough. It had been months since I started my new journey, and with each passing day, I felt more at peace with myself. The pain of losing my son's love still lingered in the background, but it no longer consumed me. I had built a new life, a life where I was in control, where I mattered not because of what I did for others, but because of who I was. I was stronger than I had ever been before. I had learned that it wasn't the absence of love from others that made me whole. It was the love I gave myself. The phone rang one afternoon, and for the first time in weeks, I actually hesitated before answering. I had grown used to the silence. It was comfortable, peaceful, even. But when I saw Ethan's name on the screen, my heart skipped a beat. I knew this call was inevitable. I had expected it to come eventually, but I wasn't sure what to feel. The pain of the past was still fresh, and a part of me wondered if the wounds would reopen once I heard his voice. But I answered, not wanting to leave the question hanging between us. "Mom?" Ethan's voice cracked slightly, and it caught me off guard. It wasn't the confident, distant voice I had come to know in recent months. There was something different, something vulnerable about it. "I'm sorry," he said, and there was a long pause before he continued. "I've been a terrible son. I've been so caught up in my own life, in Rebecca's world, that I forgot about you. I should have never let her treat you like that. I should have stood by you." My mind raced. I had heard apologies before, but they always felt empty. This time, something was different. He sounded genuine, remorseful even. But could I trust it? Could I let myself believe that things could go back to the way they were? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Ethan," I said softly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "It's been a long time. I don't know if we can just pick up where we left off. Things have changed. You've changed." There was another long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him processing my words, and I could feel the weight of the silence between us. "I know," he finally said. "I've been selfish, Mom. But I want to fix this. I want to make things right." His words were like a balm to my wounded heart, but they also stirred up a storm of conflicting emotions. Could I really forgive him? Could I trust that he would make things right, or would this be just another empty promise, another round of disappointment? I had learned not to expect much from him, not after everything that had happened. But still, something in his voice made me want to believe him. "Ethan, I've spent so many years being the one who always gave, always supported you. But I can't keep doing that. I can't keep giving everything and getting nothing in return," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've had to learn to live without you, to let go of the idea of what we were. And I'm okay with that. I've found peace." There was a moment of silence, and then Ethan's voice came through, softer this time. "I understand. I don't expect you to just forgive me, Mom. I just want you to know that I'm sorry, and I'll do whatever it takes to make up for it. I don't want to lose you." His words hung in the air, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't the grand reunion I had once imagined, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something from the ashes of what had been. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew that I had to take things one step at a time. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was a choice. And maybe, just maybe, it was a choice I was ready to make. The conversation ended with a promise to talk again soon, but as I put the phone down, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something new, something better, or if it was just another chapter in a long story of disappointment. Only time would tell. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. I sat quietly in my living room, the phone still resting in my hand, the conversation with Ethan replaying over and over in my mind. He had apologized, he had promised to do better, but could I trust him? Could I let go of the past and believe that things could truly change? It wasn't an easy question to answer. I had spent so many years giving, loving, and supporting him, only to be left alone when I needed him most. It was hard to forget the pain, the moments of abandonment, the way he had chosen Rebecca over me. But even as those thoughts swirled in my head, I realized something. I had changed. I wasn't the woman I used to be, the one who would drop everything to help her family, the one who would sacrifice her own happiness for the sake of others. I had learned that my happiness mattered too. I had learned that I deserved more. And as much as I loved Ethan, I knew that I couldn't let myself slip back into the same patterns of neglect. If we were going to have a relationship again, it would be on my terms, not just his. I didn't need him to complete me. I was complete on my own. And that was something I hadn't fully understood until now. For so many years I had believed that family was everything, that love and sacrifice were the keys to happiness. But I had neglected myself in the process. I had lost sight of my own worth. Now, as I sat there, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that I was no longer willing to settle for less than what I deserved. Ethan's apology was a start, but it was just that, a start. There was still so much to rebuild, so many wounds to heal. But I was ready for it. I wasn't afraid of the journey ahead. I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I had spent so much time fearing what would happen if I let go of the past, but now I understood that letting go was the only way to move forward. I didn't need Ethan's approval to be happy. I didn't need Rebecca's validation to feel worthy. I had spent far too long trying to please others, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. It was time for me to be myself, to live my life the way I wanted to, without guilt or regret. The phone rang again, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Ethan. I hesitated for a moment, but then, with a deep breath, I answered. "Mom?" His voice came through, hesitant. "I'm here," I said softly, but firmly. "I'm listening." The conversation wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, of doubt, of wondering if this was truly the beginning of something new, or if it was just more empty promises. But by the end of it, something had shifted. Ethan seemed different, more aware of the impact of his actions, more willing to acknowledge the hurt he had caused. And as we talked, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to rebuild, to create a new relationship, one that wasn't based on old expectations or wounds. It wouldn't happen overnight, and it wouldn't be easy. But I was willing to try. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that I had once clung to, the hope that others would change for me. It was the kind of hope that came from within, the hope that I could create the life I wanted, no matter what anyone else did. I wasn't waiting for Ethan to fix everything. I was fixing myself. I wasn't waiting for Rebecca to apologize. I was forgiving myself. And with that, I realized that I had already taken the first step toward healing. I wasn't alone. I never had been. I had myself, and that was enough.